quiet for over a year. He had kept it quiet for over a year, and so did the governor. Just substitute Kentner's name for Chambers. Here is the text of a letter from the Accountability and Disclosure Commission. Dear, as I said, it was written to me, but substitute Kentner. The confidentiality provisions of the Nebraska Accountability and Disclosure Act do not apply if you notify this office in writing that you wish this matter to be made public. And here's what the liar said. He wants to respond, but he can't. Yes, he could. But somebody who would do the dirty thing he did will also lie about it. So I wrote in rhyme a fable. A fable is where you use animals to take the place of human beings or ideas. Fable of the hypocritical jackass. What about a jackass that does bray about transparency, then is silent as a clam when he transparent ought to be? Mockery, contempt, and scorn and ridicule the ass does get, plus appropriate branding as a disingenuous hypocrite. As the sound of rusted cauldrons dragged o'er brittle thorns is grating, so the words that jackass brays to every ear are irritating. If the famous Mormon Tabernacle Choir could have their chorus say, they would croon melodiously, "O beast of burden, get thee away." By coincidence, that fable parallels a situation faced by senators who need to give their time to legislation. In their midst, a beast of burden, stolid as a stubborn mule, mucks up legislative works and revels in the role of fool. Here the irony is patent. If this beast of burden reigns, causing senators embarrassment, heartburn, gas, and mental strains, legislators ought to heed the words a famous wise man said, "Be no fool, for all who meet a fool will straightway bump his head." Then there's information where Senator Kentner offered a rules change for transparency. And that I won't read, but there's a drawing of Kentner, and above it, Mr. Transparency in action, but then it points out that he's not so transparent. Since I only have a minute, I'm not going to read further, but I'm going to read what I've got here today. I want it for the record, and I want the Cass County GOP to know that that petition they submitted to the legislature, that if Kentner won't resign, the legislature should do something, that was not wasted on everybody, and I'm not even a member of the Republican Party. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Shoemaker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the body. I'm having difficulty pulling up the exact language of the Stenner Amendment on my little device here, but I understand that it has two elements: 48 hours work time change from 24, and also that the committee hearings at the 10-day mark. Even though chairmanships ain't what they used to be, they are still saddled with the obligation to schedule hearings and manage the time of the committee. 10 days, I think, is a lot. Let me see if I can find this Stenner Amendment. The clerk was good enough to provide the language here. Change from 28 to 42, and no later than 3 business days. I'm not catching the 10-day language in here. Okay. Oh, there it is. There it is. What I had heard was correct. It does change the language in saying public hearing before taking final action on a bill, resolution, or gubernatorial appointment. A committee shall hold a public hearing thereon and shall give notice at least 7. This changes that to 10 calendar days after the bill or pronouncement shall have been printed. So this starts putting our chairs in a real pinch. and shifts to a situation where it may make life difficult and unmanageable there. Having said that, this is the supreme legislative authority of the state, of a sovereign state of the United States. Tremendous powers in this room. And we should have more than a very, very short turnaround in order to make judgments. Senator Har spent a great deal of time trying to deal with this. He himself has said that he would like a week advance, which sounds reasonable to me, instead of the 72, but he bid against himself until he's down to 72. I really don't think a 48 is going to change life very much. And as a result, this leads me to think, is there a better way to do this? Every bill has traditionally been entitled to a hearing, but is it also entitled to a fiscal note? Let's say there was a bill that said we would educate people to have abortions in this state and we would fully fund the abortions. How much time should be spent on that fiscal note? What chance does it have in leaving committee or on the floor? So maybe what we should do in the long term is consider our entire process. And when we want a good, focused fiscal note, require it at times when it looks like the bill has legs in the committee and some ability to move forward. I have immense sympathy for anybody that's asked to work on 600 bills in the time frame and then come up with a reasonable image or guesstimate of what the future looks like. However, if we don't put some pressure on the system, what's going to end up happening, this work that Senator Har has done in order to bring this to our attention and focus it may very well fall by the wayside. He be gone in 2 years. And
1 minute.
I think this may have merit in the original Har form, the 72, even though it's going to cause some consternation, to get us moving and address the systemic issue of this not being really a good way to do it. We rely way too much on death by fiscal notes, and we don't want shoddy work. At the same time, we want accurate work, and we have an obligation to spend the money on ourselves in order to get things done so that we can pass good legislation involving hundreds of millions of dollars. And that may be where this ends up, that we need to put more finances, a few tens or $1,000s in the fiscal office so that they can get up to speed. But we do need to keep the pressure on this because Senator Har has identified a significant shortcoming in our system and is doing everything he can in order to call it to our attention and get some institutional pressure to make the necessary reforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Shoemaker. Senator Hansen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd yield my time to Senator Har if he could use a few seconds.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Thank you, Senator Schumacher, for the kind words. Thank you, Senator Stinner, for your willingness to work on this. Because I think he's come to the conclusion, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, that there is a problem. We got to figure this out. We have to be efficient with our time, folks. We are citizen legislators. We are part-time employees, and I don't want to spend a bunch of time on a bill that's not going to go anywhere. And I want to know what's going on with it. I want to know 72 hours in advance so that I can not waste other